The 411th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Good! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year, the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast coming at you on a Tuesday night. Josh and Anthony, we're back with you guys once again. Was not planning to do this edition of the show tonight. Wasn't planning to really do anything until after Carolina played their season opener in football at Minnesota, which is now just 48 hours away. But as you know by now, if you don't know by now, some pretty big news on the basketball front. Zayden High, not enrolled for classes in the fall, will not be a part of Carolina basketball for the upcoming season. There were some rumors that were kind of starting to circulate out on Monday. We told you if something happens, we would be here to talk about it. And lo and behold, something happened, and, well, we're here to talk about it. So that's what we're going to do on this edition of the show as just a crazy, wild offseason. Has another plot twist in it for the Tar Heels. But before we get into that, we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, pod thought of the day. We go to former women's soccer coach at Carolina, Anson Dorrance. And that pod thought is, quote, can you drive yourself with self-discipline when others are not there? No one's going to be constantly pushing you, insisting that you get fit or hone your skills. When it truly counts, you're on your own. Your margin of success is based on your inner drive. And that's today's pod thought of the day. Anson with a lot of great thoughts over the years. We'll use plenty of them moving forward here on the pod. So let's go ahead and get into what we're here to talk about tonight, which is Zayden High not going to be a part of Carolina basketball for the upcoming season. Inside Carolina reported that around 6 o'clock this evening, they had a statement that they've obtained from the basketball program, but the basketball program, per my knowledge, it's not on their Twitter page. It's not on their Twitter page. It's not on Go Heels. Has not made that full statement public about High not being enrolled at UNC for the upcoming season. And look, on the surface, this is a guy that played in 23 games last year in 4.5 minutes, but this is a guy that between the both of us, really optimistic about, really thought this was a guy that was capable of taking a step forward. I think we both believe in his talent. There's definitely an edge that Zayden brought to the team a year ago If you remember when the team won at Cameron to outright win the ACC title, he, as much as any guy on the floor, was talking that trash to the Cameron Crazies. A guy that literally did not impact the game on the court was over there running his mouth because that's just the kind of guy he is. He was an energetic part of that bench. In the article I wrote, a great culture fit for what Hubert Davis wants in a basketball player. I mean, that guy, as much as any guy on the team last year, cheered on the success of his teammates as much as when he did something good on a basketball court. And so, we were kind of looking at him going into this season, wondering would we kind of get to see his talent, his ability come to light. And Coach Smith always said a player takes their biggest step as a player between their freshman and sophomore season. If you go by that logic, that would tell you that Zayden was going to be in for, some sort of a pretty successful sophomore campaign. None of that's going to happen now. Not this year, at least. We'll get to what Isaac Shade, the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, what he was reporting with the sources he has within the program. But and to me, I think this is troubling. The front court, I think I'm higher on it than you were with the additions of a Venau and Lubin from a Vanderbilt. You bring in Tyjon Claude earlier this month. You're trying to replace a program figure in Armando Bacot, but you need everybody to take a step forward if you want to compete for a national championship. And now, while on the surface, on paper, there isn't a lot of lost production in the loss of Zayden High, but all of a sudden this front court loses a bit of its depth, something that I don't know if they could have afforded to lose. And the worst part is man, you've gone through the summer workouts, which he was there for. He was there in practice. We watched highlights of him. They were talking, you heard some reports about how he was looking in the growth and the development he was showing. And now it's all for naught. And it's really disappointing because, after the Claude commitment, it felt like you had your roster set and it was go time to really start gearing up for this upcoming season. And now we sit here about a month or so away from the start of preseason practice, and Carolina loses a piece that could have been a part of the success they hope to enjoy this upcoming season.
Yeah, I mean, this one really hurts. There's no doubt about it, because he was a guy that could play the 5 if you needed him to, but he was also going to be able to play the 4, and be able to stretch the floor a little bit better than some of the other big men on the roster, and was also going to be a guy that could defend on the perimeter. And, the thing is you watched those scrimmages that the team had in the offseason, and you can't take a ton away from those because it's just pickup. But at the same time, you saw some things that you just did not see in his game last year, because 1, we didn't get to see him a lot, and 2, whenever he was on the floor, he was definitely, he was bound to pick up at least a foul or 2. And so I think you saw the growth that was there. I mean, first scrimmage that we saw that was, put out to us on YouTube by somebody that was in attendance, man, he was knocking down almost every 3 he was looking at. That was something that you were looking forward to having at that 4 position, especially because he's 6'9" and would have brought the size. And then you saw his ability to run the floor, especially defensively, and protect the rim. Like, those are things that you were really hoping you were going to get a chance to see. And the other thing is the mentality. Just a guy that talked a lot, liked to bring energy. And I think last year was just, a little overzealous as a true freshman. But I think he would have settled in. The personality would have been great for a team that right now we just don't know where that type of personality comes from. We don't really see anybody on the roster that really exudes that type of personality that you had with Harrison Ingram, with Cormac Ryan. Zayden High was the guy that we were looking to and saying that might be the guy on this year's team that serves that purpose, even if he is limited in the time that he actually plays. And so now Carolina is forced to pivot. They've got to find somebody else that can fill that role. But more importantly, they've got to find that added depth that they need on the wing and that they need at the center position. I think it sort of explains to us a little bit more why they went out and added Tyjon Claude. But the problem is that Claude is far from a perfect fit to fill the role that High brings, because he can't shoot the three ball at any level.
Yeah, what this does, at least in my opinion, is it really adds pressure to Jalen Withers to be a more complete basketball player. And quite frankly, I don't think he's capable of being that. And look, a lot of that is probably because I haven't forgotten those 2 possessions he had in the loss to Bama, where, he took an ill-advised 3 and then committed a pretty bad foul on the other end in the literally the final minute of the game that ended Carolina's season. But, even as this front court came together, and as much as I believed in their ability, like, everyone had a specific thing that, okay, this is what they do well. If they do this well, okay, this thing can work. But now you're going to have Jalen Withers be able to knock down 3-point shots to help spread the floor for Carolina. Because I think you're asking way too much out of Jalen Washington to be the guy that in the front court opens up the floor for RJ, Elliot Cadeau, Seth Trimble, those guys to get to the rim and live there. And I love what Vin Allen Lubin can do. The offensive rebounding stuff speaks for itself. That guy's going to grab a lot of misses and he's going to convert on a lot of misses. That guy's not capable of stepping out and shooting 38% from 3 on a volume. Like Zayden High, even though we hadn't seen it yet, if you watch him mechanically, it looked like you could see that. Like, it would make sense if he shot 38% from 3 on 2.7 attempts over the course of the season. And so, you're talking about adding depth and stuff like that. Carolina's already enrolled in classes. So adding to the roster, I guess if there's still
You
a
can.
trend,
It's
well, I mean, you can. They enroll in the winter, and
Yep.
then you're having to work someone in the middle of conference play. Like, that's like, no. Like, so now, I mean, I went from when they were adding Tyjon Claude being like semi-frustrated because I was like, okay, we got our roster, let's go. Then we add a guy, we do our homework, you really dig in, okay, I could see why they go and get him. And then 3 weeks later, we're losing another piece who was here for the entire summer. I think that's where I'm just outright I'm confused isn't the right word. No, I'm mad because we don't know exactly what it is. If you read the report according to Inside Carolina, this was on the table all summer long. Yet with that, he still participated in practices and workout sessions, was on their team bonding trip where they went to the beach earlier this month as well. And then we get to the first week of class, and all of a sudden he's not enrolled. So, if we want to be skeptical, I think it's easy to say that it was probably an academic issue where they were hoping because, these athletes, they are enrolled in summer school. He would do what he needed to do academically in the summer to be eligible to play. But that's not confirmed by anyone as at this moment. But it's pretty frustrating because, I'm not saying that RJ Davis came back because of Zayden High. I'm not saying that Seth Trimble came back because of Zayden High. But you have the pieces to win a national championship. And it was going to take every single member of this roster for Carolina to achieve that. Like, if Carolina wins a national championship, it was going to be a total team effort in doing so. And as of right now, it appears that one of those teammates did not hold up their end of the bargain in the summer, leading up to a preseason and a season that I think we're all pretty excited for, because with the best guard back in the country, you theoretically can and should compete to win a national championship.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing you can really say because we don't know what is actually happening. They will not release it to us. It's not going to happen. Like, in terms of the statement from the program or whatever, they're not going to make it official. They never, none of the sites ever write about this. Like, Go Heels is not going to put something out about him no longer being on the team. They don't do it when guys transfer. They're not going to do it now. So I have no idea what is going on. And even if we did, even if there were people that were throwing out what it could possibly be, until something is actually confirmed, then there's no reason to speculate on what's actually going on. So as of right now, you just know that we're not going to have them. And in terms of, what it does and how it affects this team as a whole, I mean, look, I would assume that it is, if it was well known by the staff, if it was known by some of the writers, then I'm assuming that guys on the team probably had some sort of understanding of there's a chance that we're not going to have him. And so they've probably been preparing as if they won't have him. So I don't think it's something that should be devastating to this team. I don't think it's nothing. I've seen a lot of people that have said, well, this isn't a loss. He didn't really do anything last year. And it's like, well, again, guys, guys can grow. This is the same argument that we were having with people that either Jalen Washington wasn't good or that people that thought Jalen Washington was going to be a superstar. Like, we have no idea. They had an off season to get better. I think Zayden High, from what we saw in those limited scrimmage clips, we saw a guy that was starting to show signs of improvement. So, I mean, that's the only thing that we can really go off of. But yeah, in terms of having an understanding as to how big of a role he was going to have on the team, we have no idea about that. I think the one thing that should be comforting to you is that one of the guys that'll probably play a bigger role because of the fact that you will not have Zayden High on the wing. You've got Drake Powell, who I think showed some flashes, and you think there is potential there. Both of the freshmen are going to contribute this year. We know Ian Jackson, with that scoring touch, it's going to be hard to keep him off the floor. I think now it'll probably be even more important for Drake Powell to be the 5-star that he was coming out of high school. And I think he has the capabilities to be that guy. But yeah, I mean, you're right. The guy that has to step up the most is going to be Jalen Withers. And I mean, I don't know if I would say I don't think it's possible. I don't know how good of we saw even in those scrimmages, like Elliot Cadeau was shooting the ball better. Zayden High shooting the ball better. Some guys that struggled last year from the outside, they were doing the things that they had to do in those scrimmages to knock down shots. It wasn't going for Jalen Withers. I think the ability to shoot from the outside that he had at Louisville, I just don't know if it's going to be there at Carolina at any point. So what they may have to do is, when Jalen Withers is on the floor, similar to what we wanted them to do with Pete Nance once we saw how good he was back to the basket, you may have to play a version of basically two big men. Now, one of them would be 6'9", but I think that's where Jalen Withers is going to thrive, is at the rim, as he showed you last year in the first two NCAA tournament games, and then probably as a mid-range guy. I think that's probably where he plays best. So Carolina may have to do some adjusting of how they want to play if they want to succeed with a guy like Jalen Withers at the 4.
Yeah, we'll now just kind of transition into how this impacts the front court. And I mean, I think dramatic is too strong of a word, but I don't think that Zayden High's potential absence was the reason why Hubert Davis, I mean, literally was like us on Tinder with a big man in the portal. Like if someone entered the portal, Carolina showed up. Because and look, I think the staff does believe in Jalen Washington. I think they think he's going to, with a guy that plays 28 minutes a night, I think you're going to see him average double digits points, 6+ rebounds. It's not him they worry about. It's everybody else. And I think you brought in nice complementary pieces in a Vin Allen Lubin, a Ty Jean Claude. But those guys aren't dynamic game changers. Zayden High, with his skill set and his ability, could have developed into that. Maybe not this year, but if you project forward, could maybe be, kind of the future of the front court. And so, I look at this and I really, we've talked about it at different times this off season. I think you're going to see an extended version of small ball for Carolina this year. I think you'll see Jalen Withers and Jalen Washington play quite a bit, but there could be a situation where you're basically playing with 4 true wings and whatever big man's out there at that time. And I don't know how that translates. I think, and I said it, I don't know if it was in the last edition or 2 editions ago. I think offensively, Carolina is going to be fine. I think they'll be ACC championship caliber good offensively. I don't think this roster is built to be as good as it was defensively a year ago. And as much as, we applaud the efforts of RJ Davis, Carolina's ability to defend and rebound really carried them to a lot of their successes the second half of the season. And so, I think what you're going to see from the front court is it's going to be their roles are going to be heightened, but you're going to see less big men, I think, playing together, where you might see what you see a lot of the NBA, which is a true 4-round-1, where that 4 guy is not a stretch 4. That 4 guy is a wing player. And look, I think, Hubert Davis talks about wanting to play that style, so I think he'll be comfortable playing that style. It's going to be an adjustment. You just worry in the long run, does Carolina hold up, A, just defensively, and B, on the backboards, if they don't have the adequate depth or the trust to play a front court that's going to be weakened with the absence of Zayden High?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. There's so many different areas that you could go with this, because we have no idea what this front court looks like outside of maybe Jalen Washington. And even that is confusing. We don't know if he's going to be a guy that takes that next step and becomes the starter that we need him to be, can play 25 to even up to 30 minutes like you were used to your starter playing. So now, I mean, it limits your athleticism, because we saw what he can do in the open floor. He's certainly built more slender, can get up and down the floor. And now, I mean, you've got Vin Allen Lubin, who, again, he's 2 inches shorter than even High was. Maybe 1. It just depends on which one you go by. Some people have him at 6'7", others have him at 6'8". Claude, also shorter, definitely not the type of rim runner that Zayden High is. And so, I mean, yeah, it limits a lot that you can do down there. It probably also brings into the possibility that you will see James Brown at some point this year, which you were kind of hoping you wouldn't necessarily have to see him. He'd be able to go through a year in the program, sort of gain weight and just redshirt. So now, I mean, you probably are telling him, hey, just in case, you need to be ready to go. And then, yeah, the thing that I think you probably will see is more than likely you will see that lineup of Washington, Tyson, and then you fill out the backcourt with whatever combination you want to fill out back there, because some guys, have stepped up so far in this offseason. But yeah, I mean, that lineup, yeah, there's going to be a lot of success offensively. Cade Tyson looks like a guy that can do everything that you need him to do in that position, which includes being able to get down the floor and score in the open court. But yeah, you're right. The biggest concern then becomes, do you have a good enough group defensively to be able to compete with some of the stronger defensive teams that are on your schedule? And that's where I feel like this probably has you a little concerned, because that was the one thing I think we all thought you could probably count on with High. Another year, you've seen the energy on that end of the floor. You figured, okay, this guy is going to bring something on that defensive end of the floor. The bigger question with him was, would he fill out offensively? Would that three-point shot fall? Would he be able to develop a game inside where he's able to finish at a consistent level? Now, we don't have to, that's off the table completely, and you're just banking on Cade Tyson being a guy that was able to take his game to another level defensively very quick. As I mentioned, Dre Powell, you're hoping that he's a guy that can progress. And I mean, look, we know Jalen Withers can defend, but yeah, to an even bigger extent, I think with Jalen Withers, you're kind of just saying he is what he is offensively. And we know he's a solid defender, where with High, you at least had that upside that you were banking on. So I think it kind of just it's going to make this team one where everybody is going to have to play at a really high level, because there's really no margin for error. There's nobody else that you can really turn to, either at that 5 spot or on the wing at the 4. It's going to be everybody, all hands on deck, trying to figure out how to put together a group that can fight their way through what'll be, a pretty significant loss if he really did take the steps that we saw during those scrimmages.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to have and ask this question. Does his absence impact Carolina's chances to win a national championship? Because I think on the surface, people are going to hear and laugh at that, because you're talking about a guy that played 4.5 minutes in 23 games. But we just spoke very eloquently about what his absence does to the front court. Like it changes, it just changes everything for what you thought. I mean, it changes expectations, it changes roles, it changes minutes. I mean, because I'm not expecting James Brown to come in here and be a contributor, but I mean, now he may have to be if Carolina wants to win a national championship. I didn't want to ask any more out of Van Allen Lubin or Ty Jean-Claude, because I think what they do really, really well. But I don't know, with now the absence of what Hyde can do, if it's good enough for Carolina to win a national title. And I'm just going to be pretty blunt about this. If we don't do what we want to do this season, which means we don't get to the Final Four, we don't cut down the nets, and it's very glaring, evident that we missed a guy of 6'9" that could stretch the floor, that could rebound, that could be an energy piece. Man, I don't know if I'll ever forgive him, because I've never, as a fan, I've never wanted someone to win a national championship as much as I want RJ Davis to. And I watched Tyler Hansborough play his senior season. Mm-hmm. I watched Marcus Page play his senior season. I want RJ to win a national championship more than I wanted those two dudes. And those are two great players and then RJ's now joined them in that category. But I mean, if I could will something in my life, I would will it for this kid to win a national championship. And so I know it might seem over, as an overreaction, but I do think that losing him, his size, his ability does impact, I think, Carolina's chances to be a national championship caliber team.
I mean, yeah, I'm with you, because I mean, now again, what kind of impact? I don't know how significant it is, but yeah, there's few guys that are on this roster that can play the 4 and the 5, that can stretch the floor and can bring the type of effort that he brought defensively. It's tough to say that we wouldn't be able to forgive him. I mean, it depends on what the actual situation is. If it comes out that this is a family matter that he has to take care of or something like that, then family comes before really anything. We've learned that over the years ourselves. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing is we just don't know. And that's why right now it's so tough to speculate. And the other thing is, like, the impact of it is tough to know at this point too, because we could have a guy that ends up stepping up. I mean, for example, let's say that Drake Powell really just takes off and them playing him out there, or, Cade Tyson takes a step defensively and you find out that you can play Cade Tyson almost exclusively out there at that 4 spot. Sometimes you got to go a little bit smaller, but it works out. Then we're not going to be sitting here talking about this. We'll say, I mean, honestly, I don't even know how many of us will remember that Zayden High was even on the roster at that point, unless he does, officially come back next year. But I do think that sitting here right now, I find it hard to believe that it doesn't have at least some sort of effect on this team, just from at least my perspective as a fan. Because like I said, I would believe that they have been told as a team that this was a possibility. You need to prepare for this, for Zayden to possibly not be here. And we're going to have lineups that are not going to have him out there. There's going to be scenarios that we really have to work on just in case this situation comes up. So hopefully they've been working on that. Look, my thinking all along with this team is that they're probably a second weekend of the tournament team. I could see them being a team that exits in the Sweet 16. With the addition of Claude, because of how good of a rebounder he was, I may have been convinced enough to see this team as an Elite 8 team. But I mean, I think now, yeah, I'd probably be comfortable with saying again, they're a Sweet 16 team, which sucks because you have much higher goals than that, especially when it comes to RJ Davis. But I just look at this roster and I don't see a perfect group, which is pretty much what you need in order to get to a Final Four. So we'll see how impactful this ends up becoming, but other guys simply are going to have to step their game up.
Yeah, one last thing that we'll talk about before we get out of here. We mentioned what Isaac Shade was reporting, and Shade is first off, a personal friend to both of us.
Mm-hmm.
Does a tremendous job on the Locked On Tar Heels podcast. And he sent out a tweet, and he's got sources within the program, and the source that he was reporting off of was saying that the expectation, the belief is that this will be a redshirt year for Zayden High, and that he'll be back in 2025, 2026 with 3 years of eligibility still remaining, which would be, in a lot of ways, if that happens, good, because you still have the 3 years of service, and you could still build your front court around him moving forward. I think it's unrealistic in today's era to expect that, where the portal is the beast that it is.
Yeah, I would. Here's how I would say it. Don't hold your breath. Be surprised if he actually returns. That's how I would look at it.
Well, because I think there's two ways to look at this. If he transfers, I mean, at this rate, no harm, no foul. That's the expectation. What you hope for is, man, this is the humbling teaching lesson that sometimes a college kid has to learn. And this is a guy that feels the burden of letting, if it's what, if it's a situation academically where he didn't do what he needed to do, that he feels that burden and he feels that pain, comes back motivated, dedicated, gets the job work in the classroom, busts his butt on the basketball court. And, at the end of his time here, we all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. If it's a family matter, then there will be no issues. And it's one of those where you take as much time as you need to make sure your family is good. Carolina had no problem doing that with Dawson Garcia when Dawson Garcia left to go back to Minnesota. I think the way that Garcia handled it was the problem that caused the friction in the locker room, which is as to why they were kind of just mum about him leaving the way that he left, and really had nothing to say nice about him when he did leave, despite him leaving to go take care of his family. So it's going to be interesting. If I had to say, do I think we see him play again in Carolina? I don't. Um, whether it's an academic or a family issue, I find it hard to believe that he suits up again. You should not expect him to suit up again, but if he does, this could be one of the crazier stories we've seen in Carolina basketball history, where a guy going into a sophomore season was supposed to be a part of the rotation, misses that year, but comes back and still has a productive career. It would be an interesting story, to say the least. But according to Isaac Shade, and he's a good man, I trust him. From what he's being told, it's that he's going to redshirt and he'll be back with Carolina basketball starting in the summer of 2025, gearing up for the 2025-2026 season. So with that, that is going to wrap up this edition of the show. This, again, was not planned to be recording tonight, but here we are. Hey, it was under these types of circumstances, but we told you, once this kind of popped up on the radar, that if something happened, we'd be here and have you covered on the podcast front and the website front. And that's exactly what we did. With that, we'll encourage you guys to visit the website, HeelToughBlog.com. The article's already up about Zayden High not being enrolled at Carolina for the upcoming basketball season. Go read a little bit more in depth about some particulars about what this means for Carolina basketball moving forward. We're inside 48 hours away from the football opener at Minnesota. The preview for the opener will be up on the website in the next day or two, so be on the lookout for that. Then we'll be back Friday morning recapping what happens for Carolina in Minneapolis. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Simply search the Four Corners Podcast, where we will pop up. There, we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the basketball offseason. And the preseason is a month away. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, because pretty much once they get into preseason mode, we'll be recording multiple times a week leading up to the season. And then once the season is here, you guys know the drill. We're the only podcast that previews every game individually and recaps every game individually. You want to hit that subscribe button. That way you don't miss any of those breakdowns throughout the basketball season. Well, with that, guys, this is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.